Today you will be working on solving multi-step equations. You need to be able to solve multi-step equations using your knowledge of like terms and inverse operations. Please get the multi-step equations graphic organizer from the folder and label it Solving Multi-Step Equations. Once again, many of you are forgetting to label your paper about which video you are doing. So please, at the top of the paper, write Solving Multi-Step Equations. Alright, let's go ahead and review some things here that we're going to be using in our work today. So if I take a look at these statements, I want to be able to fill in the blank here. When combining like terms, when we combine like terms, we are adding or subtracting terms with a common variable to put those together. On number 2 here, when using the distributive property, I should always share what is outside the parentheses with what is on the inside. Please remember to do that to every single thing on the inside of the parentheses. And the last thing here we want to review is to solve an equation which involves a variable. We need to isolate that variable. And remember, we do that by using inverse operations. So in isolating the variable, please make sure you're doing the opposite operation of what is shown. And when you do that, make sure you complete that on both sides of your equation. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look here at example number 1. Please put this in the example number 1 box on your graphic organizer. Now, as we solve this, we want to remember to go backwards in our order of operations. Remember, we're undoing all of the operations that are there so that we can isolate that variable. And in this equation, we want to get h all by itself. Now, there are different rules here to follow as we go through because there's a little bit more work involved. So if we have parentheses, we want to get rid of them. In this problem, I don't have any parentheses, so we can go on to the next step. Next, we want to combine like terms. I know that I do have a negative 6h that matches the other h, so I will have to combine like terms. After I combine like terms, I'm going to move all the variables to one side. Then I'm going to move the constants, or just the numbers, to the other side. And then I can finally solve for that variable. So again, I do not have to get rid of any parentheses. There are no parentheses here. So if I combine like terms, let's see. I have a negative 6h and an h that are like terms. I have a positive 4, a negative 3, and that is a like term with the 11. So if I combine like terms here, on the left-hand side, negative 6 plus 1 is going to be negative 5h. 4 plus negative 3 is going to be a positive 1, so I'm going to write plus 1 equals 11. I'm not combining that 4, negative 3, and 11 just yet. I want to make sure I do that on each side individually before I move things from side to side. So now we want to draw our line. And if I take a look at this, this is just a two-step equation. We've all solved two-step equations. So I want to, again, go backwards in the order of operations here. I want to undo adding or subtracting. So I see that I have an adding of a 1, so I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So on the left-hand side, that cancels, and I have negative 5h equals 10. I'm now going to undo multiplying or dividing, and I see that I have a negative 5 times h. So I'm going to divide by negative 5 on both sides, and I get h equals negative 2. Now, if I were to check that, I would sub it back into the original equation, and I notice that I have two h's, so I'm actually subbing that back in twice. So negative 6 times negative 2 plus 4 minus 3 plus negative 2 has to equal 11. Well, negative 6 times negative 2 is 12. 12 plus 4 is 16. 16 take away 3 is 3. 13, I'm sorry, and 13 minus 2 or plus negative 2 is 11. So I know that this does equal 11. So H equals negative 2 is correct. Okay, we're going to take a look here at a few more, but I want to remind you of those steps that you want to follow. So remember that if there are any parentheses, which you'll be dealing with on the next lesson, you want to make sure you get rid of those by distributing. You want to combine like terms, move all the variables to one side, move all the constants to another, and then solve for that variable like you have in previous lessons by doing the inverse operations. So let's take a look here at a second example. Now if I take a look here at this problem, again, I do not have to get rid of the parentheses. If I look here, I do have like terms. However, they're not on the same side. So right now, I cannot combine anything on the left, combine anything on the right. They are completely separate. So now I am going to start by moving the variables to one side, moving the constants to the other, and then solving for the variable. So I'm going to draw my line. Again, I do not have to get rid of parentheses. I do not have to combine like terms right now. I am going to move all the variables to one side. So I always like to have my variable on the left-hand side of the equation so that when I get an answer, I have like x equals a number or, s equals a number. It's up to you which side you want to take it to, but I always like to take my variable to the left and my numbers to the right. So to get rid of this 5x here, I'm going to subtract 5x, and that will cancel out. Okay, it is a like term with the 8x, so I'm going to subtract that. And if I simplify now, 8 minus 5 is 3x. I still have the plus 4, and that equals 28. Okay, after I undid that that variable from the right hand side, I'm now going to move that constant of 4 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 4 on the left here to cancel that out, subtract 4 here, and I get 3x equals 24. I know that 3 is being multiplied by x, so I'm going to divide by 3 to cancel that out, and I get x equals 8. Okay, so if I were to sub that back into my original equation, I would have 8 times 8 plus 4 has to equal 5 times 8 plus the 28. Well, 8 times 8 is 64, plus 4 is 68. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 28 is also 68. So 68 does equal 68. That is a true statement. So x equals 8 is correct. Let's take a look at one more example here before I'm going to give you a set to try by yourself. So remember, we want to get rid of parentheses if that is needed, which in this case it is not. We do need to combine like terms on this problem and then move the variables to one side, move the constants to the other, and then solve for that variable. So if I look on the left-hand side here of my equation, I notice that I have 5x and 3x that are like terms. It is also a like term with the negative 2x, but that's on a separate side, so I'm going to leave it there. And on the left-hand side here, I can simplify what I have. So 5 plus 3 is 8. 8x plus 24. That 24 I didn't have anything to combine with. And that is equal to negative 36 minus 2x. Okay, so I didn't need to get rid of parentheses. I did combine like terms. Now I want to move all the variables to one side. So like I said, I'm going to move my variable to the left-hand side of my equation. So to cancel out this negative 2x, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. On that right-hand side, it cancels out. And on the left-hand side, if I simplify, I have 10x plus 24 equals negative 36. Alright, this is just a two-step equation here, so I'm going to undo the adding. So I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. Simplify here, I get 10x equals negative 60. Okay, so I have moved all the variables to one side and I have moved the constants to the other. I now need to solve for the variable, and I see that I have multiplying, so I'm going to divide by 10 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 6. Okay, so that is what I'm saying my answer is. I have completed all of the steps. Now I want to sub that in to see if these two sides are equal when I sub in negative 6. So 5 times negative 6 plus 24 plus 3 times negative 6 has to equal negative 36 minus 2 times negative 6. So 5 times negative 6 is 30. 30 plus 24 is 54 plus negative 18. So I have 54 minus 18 on the left-hand side. And if I do that, I get 36. Okay, so I want to check to see that the right-hand side is going, sorry, that is not correct here. Okay. I'm going to erase that and show you here. I got x equals negative 6. I didn't have enough space here, so I'm going to do that check again. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30 plus 24 plus 3 times negative 6. So plus negative 18. Okay, so I have negative 6 minus 18, which is negative 24. Okay, so we want to see if the right-hand side here does equal that as well. So negative 36 minus 2 times negative 6, which is negative 36 plus 12, and that does equal negative 24. So I know that x equals negative 6 is the correct answer. All right, so if you take a look here, that these 4 independent practice questions, I want you to please copy them down and solve them by yourself. Please follow the steps listed at the top of your graphic organizer. That will help you go through that process, getting the variables on one side, the constants on the other, and solving for that variable. Once you have solved those, please play the video again, and I will show you the work and the answers that you should have had for these 4 questions. All right, so that may have taken you a little bit longer than our 2-step equations had, or the 1-step equations from our prior lessons, but you only had 4 to do instead of 6, so let's go ahead and take a look here at our work. Okay, on number 1 here, I'm going to draw that line so that I know which 2 sides I have to stay equal to each other. There are no parentheses, so there is no need to get rid of that. On the left-hand side, everything is simplified. On the right-hand side, everything is simplified. So there's no combining like terms here. So now what I need to do is I need to get my variable on one side and my numbers on the other. So again, I like to get my variable on the left-hand side. So I'm going to subtract 5x from the right-hand side, canceling that out. And if I subtract 5x over here, I have 3 minus 11x equals 14. I now need to get my numbers on the right-hand side, and I have 3 on the left-hand side that needs to move. Now, I want you to be careful with this. There is subtraction going on, and I noticed in our prior work that many of you added 3 or added that number to cancel it out. But if that 3 is positive, so I want to subtract 3 from both sides to cancel that out on the left. And I have negative 11x equals 11. The last step here, I want to divide by negative 11 to cancel out that negative 11. And I get x equals negative 1. Okay, moving on to number 2 here. I'm going to draw my line. Once again, everything is simplified on the left-hand side. Everything is simplified on the right-hand side. So all I need to do is get my variable to one side of the equation, get my numbers to the other side. So again, I'm going to move my variable on the right-hand side, this negative 2m. I'm going to add 2m to move that to the left-hand side of my equation. So I have negative 13 plus 4m equals 3. Okay, now I'm going to move my negative 13 to the right-hand side. To cancel out that negative 13, I need to add 13 to both sides. So I'm going to show that on the left and the right-hand side. On the left side here, I have 4m. On the right-hand side, 3 plus 13 is 16. The final step, I see I have multiplying, so I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides, and I get m equals 4. Alright, we have 2 more to go over here before you can do your next set by yourself and get those checked by your teacher. If you noticed, number 3 and 4 got a little bit more difficult here. There are still no parentheses, but now when I take a look at my problems here, I notice that I am going to have to do some combining before I can move my variables to one side and my numbers to the other. So on number 3 here, the left-hand side is simplified, so I'm going to leave that alone. My right-hand side here, I notice that I have some like terms. I have 3n and 2n that are like terms, and I have 8 and 10 that are like terms. So I'm just going to simplify that. On the right-hand side, 3 plus 2 is 5, so 5n, and 8 plus 10 is 18. So I now have 2 plus 3n equals 5n plus 18. There are no more like terms on each individual side, so I'm going to now move my variable to one side and my number to the other. So I'm going to subtract 5n from the right hand side to cancel that out. If I do that on one side, I must do that on the other. So I'm going to subtract 5n from the left side as well. So I have 2 minus 2n, because 3 take away 5 is negative 2, equals 18. Okay, so I'm going to move my numbers to the right hand side since I already have 18 over there. So to get rid of this positive 2, I need to subtract 2. That cancels out. Subtract 2 on the right hand side, and I have negative 2n equals 16. Last and final step here, I see multiplying, so I'm going to divide by negative 2, and I get n equals negative 8. Alright, the fourth and final problem here. If I draw my line here, I notice that on the left hand side I do have some like terms that can be combined. If I take a look at the right hand side, that is already simplified. There are no like terms. So on the left hand side, negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. So 1 minus 2v is what I have on the left hand side, and negative 5 minus 3v is what I have on the right hand side. I'm now going to move that negative 3v to the left hand side by adding 3v to cancel that out. And this works out really nicely. If I have a negative 2 plus 3, I get positive 1. So 1 plus v equals negative 5. My last and final step here, I want to cancel out this 1. So 1 minus 1 is 0. And v equals negative 6. Alright, if you have any questions about those, please see your teacher and they can help work through that. Okay, but I want you to take a look at 4 more problems. Please go ahead and copy those down on your graphic organizer. You can pause the video, solve those 4 on your own. And again, if you are struggling at any time with these problems, please see your teacher and they will be more than happy to help you. But once you have completed all 4 of these problems, please go get them checked by your teacher. Okay? They will help you, make sure that your work is going okay before we move on to that next lesson. Once you have completed those 4, there are some level 4 questions here for you to try if you want to. Remember, these are optional. So if I look at these really quick, I notice that they are, multi-step equations with some fractions. So, still use those same steps of there's no parentheses, so no need to do that. You want to make sure you combine like terms if needed, get those variables to one side, get those numbers to the other, and you should be able to do that process just using your knowledge of fractions. Just a reminder here, once again, that those level 4 questions are optional, but are a very good challenge to keep our mind going with fractions. Once you have completed the entire work for this lesson, please turn that graphic organizer into the bin or the folder that your teacher wants you to turn that into, and you may go to the next lesson. So hopefully now you are able to solve multi-step equations using your knowledge of like terms and inverse operations.